KNF, Korean natural farming, has been complicated to the extreme. People make it sound technical, complicated, hard to learn, expensive, when it's really quite straightforward. I've been asked this question twice in the last day, so you might be wondering, who is KNF for? It doesn't matter what crop you're growing, it doesn't matter what climate you're in, it doesn't really even matter what size of an operation you have. It's a way to lower your costs and your labor, pests and disease. It's a way to increase your yields, your quality, and the taste. It's a systemic approach that's cheaper than conventional, even organic. In fact, it's more efficient than organic. It's a systemic approach to growing food that uses the power of nature. Hi, I'm Sherri Miller, and I've been practicing natural farming since the 60s. I became a field biologist and researcher, and I learned Korean natural farming directly from Master Cho while running a commercial tea farm in Hawaii. In this video, I'm going to explain to you what Korean natural farming is. I'm going to give you some practical tips on how to start at the end, so stay tuned for that. Natural farming is growing food in ways that mimic nature. Korean natural farming is a systemic management system, a holistic approach to natural farming. The foundation of KNF is Indigenous Micro-Organisms, IMO. This is taking healthy biology as a complete intact soil ecosystem. You collect it, stabilize it, and then you amplify the culture. And then you acclimate that culture to your local soils. Once you've got that done, you have like a crumble, and that's what you put on your planting soil, and you cover that with mulch to protect it from the sun. That way you have a complete ecosystem from healthy soil, locally adapted to your area, that's already in a functional ecology. And it has housing because it has those crumble structures. In the final step, you can add biochar, which enhances the housing capability of the IMO to house the microbes. So you've got extremely high concentrations of what you want in your soil. And what this does is it allows plants to live in their natural state. In nature, you go out in the wilderness, you go in a forest, nobody's fertilizing, but there's big trees and mosses and plants and animals. There's no fertilizer, there's no composting going on. So that's what we're trying to mimic. So we have the healthy biology that runs the system, that's the engine, and we put that in the soil so the plants can determine their own nutrition rather than we don't know what the plants need. We think we do research, and we can kind of be a good guesser, but the plant knows second to second what it needs. So that's what we do, is we give it the biology so that it can take up what it needs from the soil. Now, if you're getting a soil test, that's generally telling you what's available to plants in the soil, not the minerals that are actually in the soil. But with IMO, with the soil foundation, that doesn't matter, because those microbes are going to make available any nutrient the plant needs on demand. That's the natural state of plants. So if you cannot do, or you don't know how to do, the IMO technology developed by Master Cho, you still want to find a way to get that natural soil biology into your planting soil. When I was young, my grandfather taught us to make composted leaf mulch. He had a series of screens set back in the trees. It had dappled sunlight, it was out of sight, large, medium, and small screen, and he had one place where he would dump the leaves on one end, and he would toss it over the big screen, and whatever fell through, that stayed below the screen. If it didn't fall through, it went into the original pile. Once it goes through the large screen, then he would toss it on top of the middle screen, the medium-sized screen. And what didn't fall through, what wasn't small enough, would go back in the previous pile. And he would take the medium-sized screen pile and he would toss that on the fine screen. And anything that came off the fine screen was small enough and composted enough that that was ready to go. So that's a semi-passive way to make leaf mold. I've heard of large operations, a large grain operation. I'm not sure where it is. They do broad acres of grains. And what they did is they went to the surrounding wooded areas and they got leaf mold. Now, leaf mold isn't just the fallen leaves. It's the fallen leaves, the composted leaves, and the soil duff that's on the top. That's where you'll see mycelial threads. If you see those little white threads, that's an indication that you've got a really good collection. So they would harvest these from the wooded area around their fields and put that into their planting fields. And they were able to do that without knowing how to do Korean natural farming or IMO. So there's ways that you can get these populations, these soil populations, into your soil, even if you're having trouble getting an IMO to work or you don't know how. There's ways. If there are commercial products, but that's like a handful of microbes that can be reproduced in a laboratory. They're not wild, they're domesticated, and you have to buy them. And we're trying to not spend money to grow food. That's what we're here for. So that's your soil foundation. Now we talked about BST, bacterial signaling technology, and this gets a little more in depth. It's really not complicated. You're making plant ferments of materials that is doing what you want your plants to do. And they've got hormones and enzymes and cofactors and the nutrients and biology that will signal, the hormones will signal a plant and the enzymes start the reactions and the cofactors are there to facilitate these actions. So you take a fast-growing plant. It can be a weed like kudzu, if you're in the South. It could be sweet potatoes. The pattern that Master Cho talks about is mugwort and drubwort. And he used those. You can grow them in the garden. They're medicinal. They naturalize, so you can have them growing in areas. They need to be close because when you do these leaves, they need to be picked in the morning, but before the sun hits it, before it starts photosynthesizing. Once the sun goes down, a plant will take all the energy it collected during the day and it'll synthesize and it'll respirate and it'll do the actual growing. And that's what we want, is we want vegetative growth. So we don't want photosynthesizing chemistry, we want the growth, we want the nighttime, and that builds up and it's at a peak just before the sun hits it. So you want to collect it before the sun hits it, and you want to process it without it coming into contact with sunlight, because as soon as sunlight hits it, it's like a switch and the photosynthesis will turn on. It'll change your biochemistry, and that's not what you want for leaf growth. So that's important. It should be close. Whatever you choose should be non-toxic and fast growing. You don't want to use a monocot like a grass, because a grass grows from the base, where like a vine, like a sweet potato or a mugwort, the growth is in the meristem in the tip. So that's what you want, is just the tender tips. And then what you do, okay, so if you want to get your fruit to develop, you've got flowers, they've been pollinated, and you want that fruit to develop, that's when you would use a green fruit. You want to avoid things like that are tannic or acid. So if tomatoes, citrus, things like that, use them only on their own. So if you have a citrus, use it on citrus. Tomato on tomato, that's fine. But tannic or acidic avoid those. So you take your fruit and you make a fermented plant juice from that. The green fruit has the chemistry of, we're growing fruit, we're building out the structure of a fruit. That's the signal, the biochemical signal you're giving it. And then when it has formed and you want it to ripe, then you would switch over to a ripe fruit. So you give the plant what you want it to do, and you make these plant inputs. It's very simple. You get a vessel, a fermenting vessel, a mason jar works great, although you do have to keep it out of sunlight, so keep that in mind. And you layer the plant material with raw, dry sugar, and dry is the key. If you use brown sugar, it's been coated with molasses, and that'll pull moisture from the air. And what you want it to do is you want it to use the osmotic pressure to pull the juices out of the plant material. So the sugar pulls the juice out of the plant material, and it feeds the yeast to get started. And the wild yeast, that's why you don't want to use commercial vegetation plant material. You want to use something that has not been fumigated and had hands all over it and been sterilized. And that's not, you want wild yeast, like it's growing on a tree, it's growing on a bush. And so you get the plant material, the sugar pulls out the juices, and then those wild yeasts that are naturally present, that are adapted to the plant it's already on, will ferment this plant juice. And your juice will fill up, and you'll see a little bit of bubbling going on. You don't want to add so much sugar that there's sugar on the bottom, because sugar will lock up all the water, and you need water for the biology. So you want to use just enough sugar to get it to pull out the juice and start the fermentation. And you let that go 3 to 5 days. If it's warm and really active, it could go as fast as 2, but never let it go more than 7 days. And so then what you do is you pour off the juice from the plant material. That's your fermented plant juice. That's your active ingredient, and you put it in a formula. Now, the formulas will have 2 parts of the active ingredient, so 2 parts FPJ. And by the way, some people talk about fermented fruit juice as FFJ as opposed to FPJ, fermented plant juice. But in reality, they're all fermented plant juices, so I just use FPJ. So you have in your formula 2 parts of the active ingredient, what you want it to do. I'm going for leaf growth, I'm going for ripening fruit, whatever that is. And you've got 2 parts of a vinegar. Now the vinegar needs to be made from brown rice or bananas. It's not just the acidity, it's the ionization factor. And I haven't gone into the research in detail because most of that information is in Japanese and Korean. Back to our formula. 2 parts of the fermented fruit juice, plant juice, FPJ. That's going to be sugar-based, so it's going to be sweet if you think of it a recipe. So 2 active parts FPJ, 2 parts vinegar. So you've got 2 sweet and 2 sour, so that balances the flavor out, if you want to think of it that way. And then 1 part tonic, and that would be OHN, Oriental Herbal Nutrient. And there's 5 ingredients in that: angelica, cinnamon, garlic, ginger, and licorice. And those are first fermented, and then after they're fermented, you leave the fermented juice in the jar, and you add an alcohol like a vodka. I like to use rum. I think it's got a little better flavor. And you let that sit, you stir it every day for 2 weeks, and then you pour that off, and you can do that up to 5 times. Now the recipe calls for 2 parts of angelica and 1 part of the other. So you combine those all together, and you want to combine all, so it'll take 12 weeks to do the alcohol extractions, all of that together. and that's your OHN. Now, if you don't have all of those ingredients, you use what you have. In the Philippines, they tend to use garlic ginger because they can get garlic and they can get ginger. So they just use those two. So don't substitute. Use what you've got of those ingredients. But the idea is it's a tonic. It fortifies the organism. It boosts the immune system. If the immune system is overactive, it'll temper it. So it's a tonic. And so you want 2 parts FPJ, balance that with 2 parts vinegar and 1 part of the tonic. Now, in different stages of growth, you might want to add some mineral inputs, but just start with a simple formula, deciding what you want to give it and what you want it to do. So that is sprayed, that is diluted in a 1 to 1,000 dilution. It's good to add in a cupful of seawater, 1 to 30, and so that gets diluted down in the, anyway. It's not going to be so much salt that it binds up your soil. It's just enough to add minerals, and every mineral on the planet is found in the ocean. So it makes sure that your plants have access to any minerals it may need. Now, if there's true nutrient deficiencies, it's not just a matter of conversion by the microbes, then there are some water-soluble inputs we can use to make those minerals available. So that's the basic formula, 1 to 1,000 dilution, and that's sprayed or misted like dewdrops. It should be a very light mist. It doesn't have to be underneath the leaves. It can be just on top. So you would walk at a good pace, slowly, and lightly mist everything. So you get a pretty good coverage, and it's highly diluted. But it works because it's the hormones that are signaling the plant what to do. Now, are there nutrients in these formulas? Of course there are, but not enough to feed the plant. We're not fertilizing the plant, we're signaling it. Now, if I'm in I've had farmers that don't do this step at all. They set up the soil foundation and they get great results. So if that's all you do, you'll be happy, truly happy. If you want to take it the next step, then you do the fertilizing. I mean, we're not doing fertilizing, we're doing biochemical signaling. So if I'm doing a casual operation, I might do it only when it changes phases. So I can see it's just about ready to put flower buds out, then I'll give it a flower FPJ. Or when I see the fruit, then when the fruits are about to form and when the fruits are ripening. So just at each phase. If you're doing this seriously and especially commercially, you're going to want to do this every week, but never more than once a week. And you're going to use the phase of what you want it to do. So that's the hard parts of it, and it's really quite straightforward. Then the third thing that you want to do as an action to get your systems to work is you want that functional ecology. You want plant material to compost on your land. You don't want to have waste and runoff, and you want to avoid bringing anything in. So it uses animal integration, and that can be livestock. Chickens are the ideal. Pigs work really well. They're omnivores. Chickens are especially well suited for this job. And it could be a worm bin or some black soldier flies. Black soldier flies, I think, are a better choice because they can digest anything, and worms are very sensitive, and you have to be careful what you feed them. And you want to recycle as much as you can. So in your fields, you want to do chop and drop. You want to keep things mulched or cover cropped, and you want to have ways to get the nutrients and resources to cycle on your land. I got chickens on my land, on my commercial farm, and once I had the inoculated bedding, I stopped composting. There was no need, because anything I would go to the compost would go to the chickens instead. And I also had pigs, and I had some ducks, and I've also used it on horses, sheep, and cattle. And I stopped having diseases in the chickens once I inoculated the bedding. And you use a deep inoculated litter. And if you've got pigs, you need a wood layer at the bottom, something they can rub their tusks on. So you want to house the animal in ways that enhances their natural instincts and their physical nature and how they would live if they were in the wild. And you don't see the manure. There's no smell, there's no flies. I didn't even have mites in the chickens after that. But what really surprised me was, and I had at any given moment 75 to 100 animals on my farm, and I was doing less work, which really surprised me. Get chickens, well, that's more work, right? No, it was pretty surprising to me that because everything was functional and interconnected and recycling everything, I basically fed the animals once a day. I once a week would check their water and make sure everything was all right. And about once a month I would add more bedding material to the barns. And it keeps animals, you need a properly built structure, of course, but you can keep animals warm in the winter without heating, cool in the summer, and you can brood chicks without any additional heat. And I was really shocked when I was able to do that. So the functional ecology, the integration of the animal layer, animals, people, plants, microbes. Life is all of these things. Nature is all of these things. You can't eliminate one whole type of organism and expect to have a natural system. So that's it. You want to build structures that give you a functional ecology. You want to have a soil foundation so plants can live in their natural state. And you want to use the biochemical signaling technology, the BST, to get better yields, a lot better yields, a lot better quality. You get bigger produce. It'll be tastier. It's so much tastier. And farmers that have started using these systems can get higher dollar for their produce and their livestock because it's so much better quality. So you're spending little to no money. The farmers I work with here buy a little bit of sugar, a little bit of rice to get their IMO started. And by the way, a single application of IMO can be enough. You don't have to go and do 20 collections in the deep forest and combine them all together. You want an intact ecosystem, so it's better to start with just one. And if you want to enhance that, you can do things like collect from the sunny side of the hill in the summer, because those microbes are beaten by the sun, so they're going to be heat tolerant. Or you go to the shady side in the winter, and those microbes are going to be cold tolerant. So you might want to do a collection like that to enhance the resiliency of your planting soil. So that's really all there is to it. It is a system. It does take some time to set up, and there is a learning curve. I'm not going to discount that. But on the other side, you're spending very little money. You're building systems that after you get them established will be less work for you to maintain. And I'm in love with Korean natural farming. I've been doing this literally all my life. And Master Cho had the secrets of all the missing parts that I didn't find when I was doing organic. So I welcome you on the journey. This is going to be a place where you can get more information. I'll go more into detail on things like the IMO and how to start, what steps you need to take to get the system going, because there are a lot of moving parts here. It is a system. It's not just some random inputs that you can add. So watch the videos here. I've got a lot of free resources on my website, fermentedfarm.com. I've got books coming out. I've got a lot of booklets, and how to start KNF will be the big book that'll be, I'm just finishing the writing now, and as soon as it's edited and formatted, that'll be available. All the information comes from my website. Sign up for the newsletter so you get information when that happens. And thanks for coming along for the ride. Peace and aloha.